Why are the Pleiarans interested in the destiny of Earth?
The Pleiarans are interested in the destiny of Earth because they feel responsible for the past misdeeds, irrational teachings and irrational religions, misguidance and other badnesses which their Lyranian, Lyranician, and vegan Weganician ancestors presented and inflicted to the Earthborn inhabitants in the early days of the development of the human being of Earth. Already in those early days, the human beings of Earth joyfully accepted the irrational teachings of the extraterrestrials and perfected them licentiously and self-willingly, in their absolute own responsibility up to the point of Ausartung, as this Ausartung is in danger to grow out of control in all kinds of fields. Therefore, the blame cannot be pushed solely onto the extraterrestrials, but must mostly and explicitly be searched for in the complete willingness of the human beings of Earth, because they invented and overfulfilled the measure of all terrible things, whereas the extraterrestrials only brought the bad things of the delusional leading. Nonetheless, the Pleiarans feel responsible for the wrongdoing of their very early ancestors, as well as for the incurring Ausartungen of the human being of Earth, who has opened the floodgates to all this insanity through his or her conscienceless willingness and imperiousness, and until now has been wallowing in terrestrial delightfulness and pleasures ever since.
AIDS, exclusively earthbound disease.
The origin of the rampantly spreading disease AIDS lies in Uganda, Africa, from where the disease had spread to Haiti before finding its way to the whole world through sodomistically, bestiality, perverted homosexuals. AIDS came about through sodomistical actions with long-tailed monkeys, which naturally carry the AIDS virus in themselves without being detrimental to them. The inception and transmission occurred through acts of sodomy, and later also through sodomistic homosexual activities. The Pleiarans have explained that a cure for the disease may only be found by medical researchers on Earth when it is almost too late, as the disease will have spread worldwide by then. They themselves have no medication for this exclusively earthbound disease.
Religion.
Religion, as the human being of Earth, knows and practices it, in form of his or her worship of God, worship of saints, and belief in gods, is an abomination to the Pleiarans. They consider this form of religion something that is at all times unprovable and contradicts all true and logical foundations of the creational laws and recommendations and the rationality and the intellect, and is built up on a blind belief based on cult activities that are strange to the creation, as well as irrational teachings, lies, and falsifications. Religion in the sense and understanding of the human being of Earth is completely against strange to and breaking the true and primal creation teaching, and manifests a deprivation of the consciousness-based freedom of the human being. So religion also represents a brutal, felonious, and exploitative enslavement of the human consciousness, up to the complete dependence, bondage, and lack of will, all the way to the uncontrollable fanaticism and insanity, pathological demonic obsession, and complete irrational mental dumbing down. What is this legend that 3 million years ago 144,000 Pleiaran souls incarnated on Earth to further the development of this planet? This legend has no truth in it whatsoever. The first extraterrestrials who came to Earth were not Pleiarans, but human beings from worlds which exist in another dimension in the area of the Lyra and Vega systems. The first Lyranians Lyrana together with the vegans Wegener, came to Earth for the first time 22 million years ago. Their stay here was very brief, and they took off to other star forms and planets, and their further history remains mostly in the dark, although shock troops came to visit Earth every now and then. Approximately 389,000 years ago, several million Lyranians, Lyriner, and vegans Wegener again took off from their home worlds, got into the space-time configuration of our dimension, and came to Earth, where they mixed with the earthly human life forms, created descendants in a normal kind and wise, as well as through genetic manipulations by genetic engineers. Through the normal procreation, Lyranian earthly mixed descendants came into being, whereas through the genetic manipulation, human animals and animal humans, as well as giants, titans, and all sorts of other creatures were created. Over the hundreds and thousands of years, these creatures were displaced again or died out because they were not procreative or because the conditions of life were deadly for them. These many millions of Lyranians, Lyriner, and vegans Wegener, who had left their home worlds, were headed by 144,207 leader personalities and sub-leaders, etc., who ruled over their followers in a rather hierarchic form, and this might they also transferred onto the human beings of Earth, with whom they had come together to create descendants of various kinds. These 144,207 leader and sub-leader personalities were actually ringleaders who were then decisively responsible that lots of misdeeds, irrational teachings and irrational religions could come up and take root on Earth and amongst human beings. But the leaders not only brought terrible and erroneous things and misdeeds to Earth against their better knowledge, but also many good things of the handicraft, the philosophy and the thinking, the medicine and technology, and many other things. Therefore, these 144,207 spirit forms of these ancient Lyranians, Lyrana, and vegans Wegener were not reincarnated on Earth from another planet in order to further the development of this planet, and they were also not Pleiarans, but simply Lyranians, Lyrina, and vegan Wegener. It was much later that the descendants of the splinter space traveler groups of Lyra and Vega called themselves Pleiarans. These splinter groups stayed away from Earth, while the other travelers from Lyra and Vega settled on Earth, after suitable habitable worlds had been discovered and colonized in the area of the Pleiarans. These worlds, however, just like the Lyranian, Lyranician, and vegan Wegenician planets, are located outside of our space-time configuration, so therefore in another dimension, a mere fraction of a second off our space-time configuration. On the Pleiades star cluster in our present time and space, there exists no life whatsoever, because the Pleiades are still at a very early stage in their development. Of course, the immigrated Lyranians, Lyriner, and vegans Wegener, as well as the 144,207 leader personalities remained on Earth. Consequently, they died over the course of time on Earth, in order to incarnate again and again over all the time since then into human bodies on Earth. However, without any memory of their former lives, as this is given for all human life forms through creational laws and recommendations, so that there will be no chaos and confusion in the human thinking and feeling. Nonetheless, all these fallible ones who had come to Earth were unified by Nshwish and were taught all the necessary creational laws and recommendations as well as guidelines, etc., through which the fallible ones, in particular, the 144,207 ringleaders, agreed to make good again in later incarnations the damages wrought. At the same time, they created a codex for themselves and all followers through which they should suffer from severest measures if they break from their oath of compensation and the thereof resulting mission. This Codex has been created for all the future times until the day the compensation will be completed. In the meantime, the Codex has been fulfilled and is therefore out of function, remarked 1998. Therefore, the 144,207 human beings, besides countless followers, are integrated into this Codex up to the current time and far beyond, into the future, in order to fulfill the mission of the compensation. In the new time, the bearers of the Codex are gathering anew, lead and guided through the impulses of the Codex becoming efficacious in them, through the teaching of the creational laws and recommendations, and through the help of the Pleiarans, who feel themselves jointly responsible for the fulfillment of this mission. I, Edward Albert Meyer, called Billy, act as middleman between the Pleiarans and the bearers of the Codex, as well as the majority of the human beings of Earth. In ancient times, I, as human being with a higher developed spirit form, offered myself voluntarily for this mission and task, and received an appropriate education. It is necessary to mention that out of the fact of the former 144,207 ringleaders and their history, the wrong Christian religious and sectarian legend of the supposed 144,000 chosen ones resulted, that is to say, was invented. This was accomplished by irresponsible sectarians in order to bind their true believers and other misguided followers to wrong religions and other cults and sects in order to be able to exploit them in every possible form to the last drop of blood.
Summary of the Pleiaran's message to the Earth human being.
Leading back the earthly humankind from the guidance into the unreal and wrong mode of life, wrong philosophies and the turning away from the creational laws and recommendations and the Orsar Tungan in all fields of badness, shortcomings, irrational religions and deviancies of all kind, etc., brought about through the old Lyranians, Lyriner, and Vegans Wegener, and which were created willingly, joyfully, irresponsibly, and consciencelessly through the human being of Earth, towards the right mode of life, which is in accordance with the creational laws, recommendations, and guidelines.
Nuclear threat.
The nuclear threat is a war technical insanity of the human beings of Earth, and in every sense against the creation and nature. Moreover, it is the monstrosity of schizophrenic, insane, war-game-addicted fools and psychopaths without a trace of responsibility. The military, as well as the peaceful use of nuclear energy, have endless dangers inherent in themselves which the human beings of Earth will not be able to control for a long time to come. Furthermore, radioactive radiations are released through the radioactive decay, which are still completely unknown to the earthly scientists of nuclear physics, and which they cannot even dream of.
Procedures, actions against atomic experiments.
Atomic experiments must not only be reduced through pacts between countries, but they must be urgently and absolutely forbidden. This ban must be enforced for all atomic experiments, including those that apparently no longer release any radioactivity for medical life-preserving purposes.
Radioactive waste products.
Radioactive waste products and chemical waste, which can only be recycled with great difficulty, such as cadmium, have to be found and destroyed in such a way that they can no longer become dangerous to the environment, life forms, or to nature. Radioactive waste does not belong in a bunker nor in the oceans. It may not be buried, deposited, or otherwise stored or isolated. An elimination process must be created for radioactive waste, which cannot harm the environment nor human beings.
Politics. Necessary permanent removal in current form. Pleiaranische Kontaktberichte. Contact Report 616. Excerpt.
And to say with regard to the might of the state, is that this does not belong in the hands of one might-obsessed individual or several might-obsessed rulers, but rather in the hands of predominantly democratic and thus also peaceful and free-thinking people. And the fact is, since politics and religions have existed on the earth, as well as sects, which are both religious as well as of other kinds, that has since led to political, religious and sectarian Ausartungen, murdering, wars, and terrorism, and namely as a result of the fanaticism and radicalization of the political, religious, and sectarian believers. Thus it applies here, that, as long as wrong political forms, religions and sects of all kinds still exist on the earth, from their wars, terrorism, as well as murdering, destruction, and many misanthropic Ausartungen will emerge in relation to the malicious human modes of behavior.
Stop the poisoning of the atmosphere.
The so-called death of trees and forests has been making headlines throughout the world is due to an abundance of sulfur dioxide in the air, as well as the acid rain falling from it. The so-called acid rain has catastrophic effects upon coniferous and deciduous trees, as well as upon many other kinds of life that cannot be restored by any means. That
Protectorates.
more purposeful protectorates must be established not only for endangered animals, but also for endangered plants of all kinds. Such protectorates must be divided over the entire planet, and nature must be left entirely to its own devices. 3.
Contamination with oil and the burning of rubber.
The environment must be free of burdens which are created by the transportation of oil by unsuitable means and the burning of rubber. Wherever possible, transportation of oil must take place as safely as possible, until it has been replaced by another energy form which is safe for the environment. It is irresponsible and thoughtless to transport oil in ships that are not suited or safe for such a purpose. Rubber and other materials are a heavy burden on the environment and must not be burned. Instead, they must be regenerated by logical means and returned for production and use.
Exploitation of raw materials.
Raw materials such as crude oil, rocks, metals, chemicals, etc., are valuable and indispensable components of our Earth and take approximately 2 million years to develop. They must not be exploited under any circumstances, handled senselessly or without thought by profit-greedy and power-seeking elements. All raw materials are to be replaced by other suitable materials such as E, G, silicates, etc. as quickly as possible.
Earthquakes.
Not all earthquakes should be blamed on humankind and its applied technology. Many are of purely natural origin and are connected with the natural developmental cycles of Earth. Even though the human being must be blamed for triggering some devastating earthquakes, for instance, through the construction of artificial lakes, overexploitation of oil and gas, as well as through the construction of gigantic cities. Why,
Hurricanes, tornadoes, and extreme weather.
tornadoes and hurricanes are closely connected to climate changes, often associated with the human being's mismanagement against nature. For example, the cutting down of entire forests, the construction of river barrages and artificial lakes, the destruction of cultivated land through harmful chemicals and poisons, the over-fertilization and clearing and devastation of land, etc., atom bomb tests, the activities and their consequences of nuclear power plants, the burning of fossil energy sources, and the utilization of modern chemicals and poisons. When?
Ozone, ozone layer, and ozone holes.
The destruction of the ozone layer is caused by the same human carelessness, sloppy work and bungling, mainly through the usage of fluorinated hydrocarbons, nitrogen oxide, nuclear radiations, and through released exhaust gases, etc., from the explosive combustion engines. Further reading, ozone. The growing destruction of the ozone layer and the resulting dangers can only be resolved through a rapid global agreement to prohibit the production, use, and freeing of all substances destroying the ozone layer.
Food importation. Independence from food importation from foreign countries.
Above all, local products shall be used. Our farmers should not continue to destroy great parts of their harvest for the sake of subsidy. Such practices are witness to utter unscrupulousness. In Switzerland, the farmer can count on an average income of 50,000 francs, which really should be enough even without subsidy. Farmers who destroy their whole harvest, or only a small part of it, shall be delivered to the proper authorities from this time onward. Food from foreign countries shall and may be imported only when it is otherwise not possible, when that particular food cannot be grown locally for any reason, climate conditions, or when not enough of the food is available. Independence from foreign countries on the food market can also be influenced substantially by the individual citizen who has a piece of his own land that he cultivates and where he can grow his own food. The use of food from your own countries and to stop import. Rather than using exotic fruits, vegetables, and imported foods, we must increase the use of our own products, which often lend themselves to the most tasty and healthy dishes. By the preferred use of local products, we can also put a stop to farmers destroying their crops because they lack a suitable market for their products.
Reduction of air travel.
The use of supersized airplanes is to be stopped at once. The contamination and burden of the atmosphere by these planes cannot be justified by any means. During the flight of a plane with 310 seats, which is usually only partly occupied, exhaust fumes per hour are created equaling the exhaust fumes of 800 Volkswagen automobiles. These in-flight exhaust figures do not even take into account the fumes created during takeoff and landing. This is also true for the acceleration of rockets, except that they emit even larger amounts of exhaust fumes, putting an even greater burden upon the environment. Average use of fuel by a moon rocket equals sign 29 tons per second. Ton.
Limitation of private transportation.
Where private transportation is not absolutely necessary to live and work, it must be limited, and whenever possible, must be forbidden altogether. In place of this, a public means of transportation must be developed, improved, and used to be safe for the environment. The contamination of the atmosphere must be avoided at all costs, such as the prohibition of driving on Sundays, as well as a ban on pleasure trips and drinking sprees, etc.
The situation of Earth.
The situation of Earth is threatening, and indeed in many different aspects, concerning the overpopulation, the military affairs and arms industry, the contamination of the entire world, through poisons of all kind and radioactivity, the felony, might politics, drug addiction, irrational religions, earth-wide mismanagement in all areas, financial exploitation, etc., misuse of chemicals and poisons, terrorism, racial hatred, human trafficking, prostitution, anarchism, irrational evocation of the dead, spirits and demons, acts of war and revolutions, etc. What can be done against this? First and foremost, an immediate reduction of the earthly human population through a humane form of a worldwide stop in births with a subsequent follow-up of permanent birth control. If no stop in births and no birth control is initiated to keep the number of human beings on Earth in bearable limits, 529 million would be the normal number of inhabitants on Earth. The problems will increase infinitely, and one terrible thing will entail the next one, because the human population grows continually, and likewise the problems and become unsolvable. At the same time, the elimination of various damages, according to their cause and effect, is of irrevocable necessity and a most urgent requirement. The Pleiarans themselves suggested that the following important measures be taken to end the destruction of Earth. As mentioned, for several years there must be an absolute stop in birth, followed by a permanent birth control. Immediate end of all exploitation of the Earth, including the exploitation of the forests and the devastation of entire landscapes, etc., until a bearable, acceptable level for the Earth has been reached. Stop of all nuclear tests. Stop of production for the abuse of certain narcotic drugs, other drugs in nature and life-damaging chemicals and poisons, and every misuse. Destruction of all existing nuclear power stations. Stop of mismanagement of any kind. Furthermore, abolition of wrong politics and irrational religions in the current inadequate forms which are against nature and the creation. Formation of a global unity government in a unity democratic form. Dissolution of all war-directed military blocs and of all political and military secret services. Dissolution and prevention of all war activities and revolutions, etc., abolition of the torture and the capital punishment, and of all other life and earth burdening and affecting badnesses and shortcomings of all kind. Formation of a worldwide and peoples connecting and peoples protecting troops of order and of security, consisting of members from all existing peoples and races on Earth. Global spreading of the laws and recommendations of the creation and the learning and following of the resulting mode of life, which is in accordance with the creation and therefore also human and human-worthy. Worldwide furtherance and realization of the compensation of all the created damages caused to the land, forests, meadows, water, atmosphere, plants, human beings, animals and other creatures, and microorganisms.
Effective steps.
Completely new and effective steps must finally be taken in all areas of assistance to human beings, fauna, flora, nature, and the planet. On one hand, the evils and problems which exist presently must be combated and eliminated successfully, so that their origins may never spread again. Old-fashioned remedies to fight evil and damage, to soothe misery, etc., are either outmoded or completely senseless and ineffectual. They must be replaced by methods and actions which can combat the great evils, misery and destruction, and will be able to be master of all situations. Organizations and politicians discover and formulate only ineffectual partial solutions, which are minimal for the aid and removal of these conditions. This corresponds to very little in reference to effectiveness. It can be proved that 40,000 children die of hunger on Earth every day, not including the unknown cases of the direct hunger victims, which include at least another 20,000 to 40,000 victims. On the endangered species list of animals living in the wild, over 50,000 kinds are listed, of which 300 kinds disappear every year or die due to the fault of the human beings. Seals cannot be saved from mass slaughter by the childish actions of spraying them with paint, but solely and alone by effective measures and proper thinking and actions. The problems of energy and hunger cannot be solved with the building of new energy plants or by transporting food to the areas of famine. With the constant increase in population, these evils can never be eliminated when the insane production of descendants is not stopped. Any new established source of energy will stop as soon as the population has geometrically increased again and is in need of additional energy. This is similar to the necessary food supply for the hungry. The more food that is produced, the more it is needed and used by uncountable descendants who cannot be fed in this way. Hence, the only possibility to eliminate these evils lies in a multi-year enforcement of birth control throughout the world, calculated according to fertile soil and the number of inhabitants in a particular state. And
Protection of waters.
the extinction of our waters, rivers, streams, lakes, and the oceans has taken on an alarming dimension. Due to the abnormal use of artificial fertilizer and other chemicals, our waters are deprived of oxygen, which leads to the rapid extinction of water animals and to the development of slime. These developments are not the only dangerous and life-threatening. Equally as dangerous and life-threatening is the unnatural heating of waters by atomic power plants. Our largest waters, the oceans, are not only irresponsibly exploited, but in a short time will also be completely contaminated by oil, through chemicals, by radioactive waste, etc., which are irresponsibly and thoughtlessly dumped into and there, in the depth of they do their malicious and destructive work. Energy forms which are gentle on the environment and new methods for gaining raw materials. Scientists should be motivated to channel their efforts to search for energy forms which are gentle to the environment and do justice to nature, such as solar energy and wind energy, etc., instead of concentrating in the area of weapons research and war materials. All newly achieved sources for energy and raw materials must do justice to nature and be gentle on the environment and all life forms. They must never be used to disadvantage the earth, nor used, not even at a minimum, against nature and the life forms on earth. In order for the efforts and research of environmentally safe energy and raw material crowned with success, an immediate and controlled birth control plan must be activated throughout the world. The constant increase in population continues to demand more and more energy.